do you think Kyle Shanahan's dream game looks like?
I'd say the NFC Championship. Maybe not 3 attempts. I mean, to me, part of that game, it's easy to make fun of it. It was 20 degrees and 75-mile-an-hour winds, right? It was weird because, like, on TV, the winds, it didn't feel that windy until they, like, kind of showed shots of flags and stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think his dream game is not, like, Andy Reid's dream game is 700 yards in the air. That's not arguable. Like, it would be 50 points on the board and at minimum 6 touchdowns. Maybe he'd get a running touchdown for Clyde or something, but it's throwing the ball. I think we don't need to really argue this one about Kyle what he prefers, and that's running the football. So did his dad. Like, it's the family motto is the zone runs, right?
Right. I guess what I'm saying is that part's not debatable. But
I think he wants a sweet quarterback more than maybe Bill. Like, I don't think Bill cares. I do think Kyle does care. That's where I see where you're going.
Like 2019, the 49ers were 29th in pass attempts. They went to the Super Bowl. Could have won the Super Bowl. They were 13th in yards, though. So when they did throw, they were really good throwing the football.
But weren't they the number 1 rushing team, and their defense was one of the best?
That's right. And I think that's fantastic. But I don't think here's what I don't think about. These two things is kind of they go hand in hand. Part of the reason you don't throw the football sometimes is because you can't throw the football. Throwing the football is a great way to get the football down the field. And running the football is also a great way to get the ball down the field, but it requires more things to go right because by and large, the plays you run, they don't go as far as the plays you throw. Throwing the football is a more efficient way to get the ball down the field as long as you can limit mistakes if you're not turning it over. But getting
check, that's true.
Like, nobody wants to be in a tie game kneeling on the football with 45 seconds left at the end of a half. You'd love to have a quarterback that you can trust to get the ball down the field in 45 seconds or a minute or whatever. So I think, yes, Kyle would love to never have to, every coach I think would love to never have to throw the football and just run the whole game, maybe with the exception of Andy. If you're like, that means I control the game. My quarterback never turns it over. He doesn't check. He doesn't read to the third play. It's just, here's the play, run the ball, let's go. And let's take their soul. Because I saw Mitchell Schwartz tweet this the other day, and I think he's right in the comment. I've heard football people say this over the years, just talking to people. I'm sure you have too. Like, part of running the football is about establishing a physical imprint on a game. This is what we are. At the end of the day, football is a physical sport. You can't play it without physicality. And so if you're going to be the more physical team, you do something to the football game by playing the game that way. Right. Agreed. Even if sometimes statistically throwing the ball makes more sense, there is just a style of football, physical. You just have to be a physical football team to win. You just look at the college football playoff over the years, right?
But in the NFL, probably more than college football, unless you play in the Big Ten. December games and January games, when you just look at a lot of the top teams historically the last 20 years, right? New England, Pittsburgh, Baltimore. Cincinnati's had a lot of playoff teams. Green Bay, you're talking Kansas City. Like, the NFC probably has less. Seattle, they've been good. Like, you go in there, it gets cold and wet. Like, it's just part of being able to run the ball is the elements, like you saw last night, factor in. The weird part is for Kyle, in San Francisco, if his team is consistently a high-level team, the weather's not really going to play that much of a factor, right? But for a lot of these people, like for Bill Belichick, he cannot avoid the weather. For the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Ravens and Andy, the weather is part of what they're doing. Now, I do think Andy's unique is he's coached in the weather his entire career, so I think he's just more comfortable. Like, he knows what to call, I guess, in certain situations. Like, he's seen enough in Philadelphia before he even got to Kansas City, like what would work or what wouldn't work.
Yeah.
I do think that factors in, probably more than college football, right? December games and obviously playoff games in the NFL.
I agree. There's no
chance. The NFC, beside Green Bay, it's probably a little less impactful than the AFC. Part of that, the NFC East with the Giants and the Eagles have been shitty the last couple of years, so you're never going playoff games there. Atlanta's been indoors forever. Tampa's warm as hell, and the Saints is an indoor place. So there's a division that's been out of it, and then the South, which has produced a couple teams over the decade, has either been indoors or it's really sunny.
Well, to that end was funny, just as an aside, watching the Pac-12 championship game Friday.
And the Bears suck always.
Yeah. Although the Cardinals just won there in 35-degree temperatures, so even though the Bears aren't a playoff team, it is like the Cardinals kind of proved something this week. They could play in that weather, although they did it against the Bears. But watching the Pac-12 title game on Friday, it hit me like this game feels bigger to me than it used to. Now, maybe part of it, the crowd was better because it's in Vegas.
It was sweet.
But I think part of it was it looked like all the other championship games. It looked like the Big 12 championship game. It looked by being inside. I love an outdoor game on grass, but an indoor game in a sweet modern stadium on artificial surface, that's what the Sugar Bowl looks like. That's what the Peach Bowl looks like. It's what the college football playoffs look like, unless the game's at the Fiesta or the Rose. It's what the national championship generally looks like. It's what all those preseason big games when they play at Jerry World, which is where the Big 12 plays their title game, the Big 10 title game in Indianapolis, the Mercedes-Benz Dome where the SEC title game is. All these big college football games are indoors, with the exception of the Fiesta and the Rose Bowl and when those games are CFP games. But all the playoff games are inside games. So that's another reason
one conference championship game was outdoors. I saw someone tweet the ratings. It was by far the lowest viewed game, which was the ACC championship game that's played at Carolina Stadium.
Oh, yeah, ACC.
The SEC had 15 million people. The Big 10, I think, had 9. The Big 12 had 8. And where's the Big 12? Oh, they play in Jerry's World. And the Pac-12 had like 4.5. The ACC was like 2. And honestly, I tried to watch a little bit. I had on the second TV. I changed it to another game. Like, it is a hard watch. Their crowd, though, had like what the Levi's crowd used to have. I do think the Vegas thing was a huge hit for the Pac-12.
Yeah. And a lot of Utah fans, which helped. That's only 5.5 hours. Anyway, back to Kyle. So, yes, I think fundamentally, but I think what we've seen in the drafting of Trey Lance, the joke being that's what Kyle would love to do. Jimmy Garoppolo, that's the offense. That's the game he'd love to call with Jimmy. But the drafting of Trey Lance is the acknowledgement that you can't just rely on that forever. You can't just rely on being in total control of the game as the head coach and running the football all the time. Running backs get hurt. Your running backs get hurt. Sometimes your quarterback has to be able. And Josh Allen, like, if the Bills had won the game, what would have been the story of the game instead?
Josh Allen's arm penetrates the wing.
Yes, that's right. That would have been the story. Like, Josh Allen, his team got dominated on the ground, absolutely dominated. They got the run game, they got scrubbed. And Josh Allen out of the pocket, making plays, finding a way. That would have been the story of the game.
Well, I text you last night. I do think there is just as productive but less violent on your running back is the deep handoff over the pitch / toss does feel like Kyle sends people to injured reserve. It's like that game was equally as physical on the ground, but doesn't it feel that just like the fullback, Mac, deep handoff for the outside run to the edge is a less violent play than the toss sweep? Because the toss sweep feels like an absolute war of collisions and on both sides, and which is awesome. But goddamn, the Niners lose people for 2 years. I watched everyone. The only time the Patriots had an injury running outside on the edges the whole night was when Damian Harris's hamstring tightened up. Other than that,
after
every guy
like a 15-yard run, right?
Yeah, every guy would just pick each other up on both sides. It felt like, God, this is a pretty clean game. Kyle's toss sweeps feels like someone's going to die. Because I think you get extra room to run. Like, when you're running on a mesh point, I have to hit you. On the toss, I'm gaining depth. And then I'm seeing it. So I'm getting, like, extra room to get some speed. Kyle's got to figure out a way to run just do what the Patriots did. I'm not saying get rid of the toss, because I think that's Kyle's favorite play in the playbook in 2021. What would you say his favorite play in the playbook is so far this year? The toss. Yes. He loves the toss. I mean, it's the first Kyle's game plan, because in fairness to him, it's worked a lot. It's like, is my toss going to work this game? Because if it is, then I'll just run it 10 times the first quarter. And if it's not, then we'll just try some other plays. But get ready. To me, the number one thing, like for the Bengals, protect the edges on that first 2 drives of the game. Because he's going to run the toss at minimum to both sides. Over-under probably be 5.5 in his first several drives. Because all he has to do is hit 1, and then you're immediately getting 2 more, so you're at 3.
Yeah, is he going to start the game calling the game the way he called the game after Garoppolo's interceptions, where it's just like, He is not throwing the football right now, right?
But
Which
he
is
started.
usually the
He
reaction.
started that game like to start the Rams game, to start the other games. He just started the game, the Minnesota game. Like he'll just start like that.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. The hope is that he gets. I think his hope is that he gets a 2-score lead and never throws the rest of the game.
Well,
but that's not ideally what. I mean, that's not. When he had Matt Ryan, he was a top 2 throwing offense.
Well, it's like, okay, you're playing Cincinnati this week. Let's just assume the weather's going to be okay. Like just a 50, cold Midwest day. Here's what Belichick self-scout would say. Listen, everyone thinks the toss is coming. And listen, I don't tell you not to run the toss because if Elijah Mitchell doesn't have a 7th concussion and 4th broken finger, hand him the ball. But what if you just, on the first play of the game, threw a deep bomb? Do you know who would not see that coming? I don't know. Nobody, because you would never do that.
I predicted that was coming last week.
Part of what Belichick's strength is, and you and I talked about this before we jumped on, is how unemotional he is to any given play or any given scheme. It's like, I'm just trying to win the game. Like, there is no debate. Kyle is emotionally tied to his offense. I'd even say this, like, what is Josh McDaniels' offense?
Well, ideally, it's the same as Bill Belichick's defense. Just find a way to use the people we have.
Yeah. But if I gave him tomorrow...
Like, what's his identity? If he were the head coach?
But if I gave Josh McDaniels... Now, you could say this for any offensive coordinator, but if I just gave him Justin Jefferson and Devontae Adams, and I took away his tight ends, they would immediately just change their offense, right? I think it would be hard for a lot of coaches, because a lot of coaches, and this to me is the Patriot way truly is, like, we have to know everything. And I just wonder, like, as Kyle adapts, and we'll see this with Trey, can he just incorporate things that, like, I give Harbaugh credit. Now, he's not the offensive coordinator. He's just the head coach. But he clearly, once they got Lamar, like, we just got to change our whole thing around the guy. Right? Because for 5 years with Flacco or whatever, they clearly looked not like Harbaugh wasn't tied to any offense. But now Kyle did it once upon a time as the offensive coordinator with his dad, with Robert. They just ran the pistol, remember?
Yeah, I think
he has the capability.
I think he will. I think the question is, can he develop Trey Lance into being the guy that can, much like parenting, eventually you let the child go and they're on their own and you take the training wheels off and that means that they can ride all over. Will Trey ever become that guy who can play outside of Kyle's control?
And you said it on the last podcast. Ultimately, now we can argue all day long if he's doing the right thing, and I think it's fair to say that, going all in on Jimmy, it'd be one thing if they were 8-4 or 9-3. It'd be like, hey, listen, veteran quarterback, you got to do it, try to win this year. Fuck, worry about next year. They're 6-6. You lose this game, all of a sudden it's like, was this for naught? But he's done everything possible to build this thing around Jimmy's strengths and a lot of his weaknesses.
Yep. That's part of what makes the Trey Lance era so fascinating is how does it look different, right, with a different quarterback? Brady on the stream says the Bills clock management, wasting timeouts in the third. Believe me, Middlecoff and I were texting about, or you sent me a text about that. That's two guys that had the Bills +3. And Belichick going for the 2-point at the beginning of the game were examples of why Bill was out coaching the Bills. Was your impression that Bill went for 2 there because they were driving into the wind at that point and that going that way? Was that why you thought it was? Or
at the time, I didn't quite know, right, because they hadn't flipped fields and stuff. But, yeah, I mean, as the game went on.
The ball going the other way was the one that got the opening kickoff into the stands.
Yeah. So he's kicking into the wind, which, if the extra points now, which ironically Bill fought for, right, to move it back.
I thought of that during the game.
But he doesn't care. See, he's like, I'll fight for this. This is the rule. This is what's going to happen. The difference, though, is with Sean McDermott, I will defend him a little bit on one of them. And Peyton mentioned this to Eli. Should they start using their timeouts in the third because they're with the wind this quarter?
Interesting.
And one of them, the clock got down, and they were in the red zone. Do you fall in a game like that where the weather's playing a crazy condition? You're only getting in the red zone so many times. When you do get into a compromising where you're up against the clock, to me, in a 28-30 game, yeah, it's like, come on, guys. Do whatever. But in a game that for 15 points was going to win it, I can't crush you on your quarterback not looking at the clock and you calling a timeout to bail him out.
Yeah, part of it was you're right, to defend the Bills for a second it felt like in the third
missed
quarter
a challenge, right?
One more if you could get a touchdown, that we'd win the game. We'd win the game. And they would have. A touchdown would have won them the game. and would have at least gotten us a push. Although the Patriots probably don't kick a field goal. Well, they might have kicked the field goal still. They would have actually, because that was beginning of the fourth quarter that Nick Folk made it 14-10. So yeah, that's actually not a terrible point. Like, we're going to need the touchdown, and we're going to need, at that point, it would have been 11-7. They're down 11-7. So a touchdown makes it 13.
14. Yeah. 13.
So you would have needed the extra point. Yeah.
The difference, though, is they didn't throw it that much in that first half, that it was clear by the fourth quarter. It's like, hey, Josh can, it doesn't matter which way you're going. Like, he can throw it in this. Like, would have been fascinated to me, and we didn't get to see with Mac, but like Mac and Jimmy have very similar arms. What would it have looked like if a guy like Mac, Jimmy, Alex Smith, it probably would have fluttered, right?
Into the wind. Alex was there. They should have had him throw a few balls.
He did. He was playing catch with Randy. I saw him Instagram story it.